This is a lesson about social studies, economics, page 1143. And if you open your page to page B on problem number, well, it'll be 24 through the end of that page and beginning of the next page. There's a whole section about the enterprising young, whatever he's called. Let me find it here. What's he called? Economist, enterprising young economist on page 5 in the PACE. And they lay out how much, this is comparing Saudi Arabia and the United States, and present a scenario where the United States says we're going to stop producing any oil, import 100% of our oil from Saudi Arabia. Meanwhile, we're going to produce lots and lots of food for Saudi Arabia, which they have a hard time producing, and tell them to just stop producing food. And we'll do this complete trade-off, so we call it absolute, where they just completely stop producing one thing and produce 100% of something else. Then they present a problem on page, in the PACE, page B. And let's look at the directions here now on page B. It says, congratulations, you have been appointed an enterprising young economist and have been asked to arrange trade between England and Sri Lanka. Study the following production possibility curves carefully and complete the activities that follow. Now, let's talk about this for a minute. In this scenario, England is really good at producing automobiles, cars, and they can produce a lot of them. Meanwhile, Sri Lanka doesn't have a high demand for automobiles, and they have a lot of production in tea. And they drink a lot of tea there too, but England likes to drink tea. And so this young enterprising economist comes to both countries and says to Sri Lanka, if you used all of your capacity, you could be producing 50 cars, but you wouldn't have any tea. And if you use all of your production equipment and people and resources, you could produce 100 tons of tea, but you wouldn't have any cars. And right now, you are at this point right here, you're producing 60 tons of tea that you produce, that you use up yourself as a country, and you're only producing 20 cars. I got a deal for you. I can make, if you'll put all of your energy into making tea and let me take the difference between what you're currently using and the 100, I can get you more cars in here. That tea is worth a lot over there in England, and I can get a lot of cars for England. We'll do a trade-off. Meanwhile, he goes over here to England and says, I can see that if you put all of your resources to making cars, you can make 1,000 cars. But right now, you only need 600 on your roads, and you drink about 8 tons of tea, your people here in your country. And if we could have you, if you were to put all of your resources into making tea, you could do a maximum of 20, but hey, that's a lot more than you'd ever need. So why don't you put all of your energy into producing the 1,000 cars, and I can get you more tea than you can drink, and take some of those extra cars and sell them to Sri Lanka, and you will have more cars than you have right now at this point, and more tea than you have at this point, and I'll make a little money on the side. So he strikes a deal with them. Now let's look what happens here. England has a top limit here. They cannot produce more than 1,000 cars. Over here, Sri Lanka has a maximum here of 100 tons of tea that they can produce. And they don't want to go less than 20 cars, and they don't want to go less than 600. So we have a window of opportunity in here that we can play with some numbers. Meanwhile, England says we don't want to go less than 600 cars, and we don't want to go less than 800 tons of tea, but we'll play with some numbers in here, and we can be happy. Sri Lanka can be happy, and this young enterprising economist can be happy. So I'm going to give you a different scenario than what this PACE score key has, and then you can look at this example, and then you can go back and study the PACE score key and also see where they get their numbers and how this works. So England is asked to do 100% production of vehicles, 1,000 vehicles, and we're going to suggest to them that they Let's jump them up to 800 cars that they're going to keep. And we're going to take them all the way out here to 18 tons of tea. All right? Meanwhile, we're going to go to Sri Lanka and say, we're going to double the number of cars. Instead of having only 20 cars, we're going to take you up here to 40 cars. And instead of only living with 60 tons of tea, we want you to be able to have 70 tons of tea. So right here, 40 cars, double the number of cars they had, plus more tea than they have been consuming to this point. So this is a big increase for both of these countries. Now let's see what happens. Sri Lanka is going to produce 100 tons of tea. They're going to sell 800 tons over here to the English, and they're going to continue to consume 70 tons, excuse me, not 800 tons, tea. They're going to sell 18 tons of tea to England. Sri Lanka's big tea drinkers. They're going to continue consuming 70 tons of tea. All right, now let's come back and talk about England. England's going to go a maximum capacity of 1,000 automobiles. And instead of only consuming 600 of those, they're now going to consume 800 automobiles. And they're going to sell 40 automobiles to Sri Lanka. Now, what's the difference here? England produced 1,000. They're consuming 800. They've sold off 40 of them. There's 160 left over. And that's the profit that this enterprising young economist gets to keep. And he can sell them to his friends or sell them to other countries, and the profit from that he gets to keep for himself. Because both of these countries have benefited in this deal and gotten more than they had before. Sri Lanka went from they produce 100 tons of tea, sell 18 to England, still consume 70, and they're going to leave the economist with 12 tons. That's quite a bit of tea. That's more than England consumed before this change took place. So he's got a lot of tea that he can sell and make money on. So everybody in this scenario is happy. But you can try some different numbers. Anywhere in this box, you can put some numbers and then try some different things that just all of these have to add up. These have to add up to 100. These three numbers have to add up to 1,000. And you can put any numbers in there that you want. Try some different numbers. See if you can make the enterprising young economist make even more money. And then go check your answer against the score key and look at the example of the answer that they have there. I hope that helps you understand it a little bit better.